Hey guys, in this video I'll be reviewing the top 2 at the 2010 Mr. Olympia, Jay Cutler and Phil Heath. This was Jay Cutler's 4th and final Olympia win, bringing a comparable yet not as impressive physique to 2009. On the other hand, Phil was rapidly improving and did enough to place 2nd at this show. I wanted to see just how close it actually was between the two and if there was a possibility that Phil should have won this show. Now, before we do get into it though, if you guys enjoy my videos, a like and sub would really help out the channel. With that all being said, let's get into this video. Here's the first pose, the front double, and in this one you immediately see the differences in their physiques. Jay was just massive here, having huge arms, legs, and lats, but had flaws within his biceps and a wider midsection. In contrast, Phil was basically flawless, showcasing near-perfect symmetry, apart from in his abdominal muscles. Looking at the arms, I'd say that Phil easily takes them due to his symmetry and separation advantages, plus those amazing forearms really do complete his arms. The torso heap would, I'd say easily go to Jay though, as even though his midsection is wider than Phil's, he is so much wider overall and creates a much better V-taper. Quads are close between the two, however, in this pose, Phil does show more separation and fullness, but not necessarily more size. Both have good calves, however, in this specific shot, I do prefer Phil's lower body. Now, between the two, I'd probably go with Phil for the win. He has less flaws than Jay, and even though he's more narrow, he looks proportional thanks to his smaller midsection. Here's the front lat spread, and this is a Jay Cutler pose all the way. Now, don't get me wrong, Phil looks really good, however, his narrow structure does hold him back a little bit. He does have huge ripped arms, great delts, a thick and strided chest, good lats, and amazing legs. However, this pose really is all about the structure. That is definitely where Jay gets Phil, as although Jay has weaker arms and a wider midsection, his wide clavicles compensate for those flaws and help him create a dominant pose. Additionally, Jay's quads really look much better than they did in the last pose, and I'd say that he's now winning there over Phil. Regardless, I'd still give this pose to Jay as his structural advantages are too much for Phil. I mean, come on guys, just take a look and tell me who looks, more aesthetic. The side chest is definitely a close one between these two, as both bring unique things to the table. On one hand, you have Phil, who has an outstanding upper body, huge arms, delts, and chest, tight midsection, and great side leg, all with a bubbly three-dimensional look. On the other hand, you have Jay, who has tons of mass, insane muscle maturity, but less of an aesthetic look. Personally, my eyes are drawn to Phil solely due to his ridiculously full upper body. However, I am more impressed with Jay's side leg. I don't necessarily think that Phil is outmassing Jay or the other way around. However, Phil looks so much fresher and more polished in the shot, while Jay's physique looks worn out and grainy. I think I'm leaning more towards Phil here, as I prefer his aesthetic appeal. However, Jay wouldn't be losing by a lot. The back poses are definitely where this comparison begins to get way more competitive, as this shot is going to be extremely hard to judge. Both have huge arms, great legs, and outstanding conditioning. However, the backs are where the biggest differences are seen. Jay has a much wider and thicker upper back, but has some atrophy in the lower back that leaves the pose looking a little bit incomplete. Phil, on the other hand, has a near-flawless back, but doesn't have the trademark size that he would in later years. While Jay does have a clear width advantage in this pose, I think that Phil does enough everywhere else to get a slight advantage here. His glutes and hamstrings look a tiny bit more peeled, and his arms are a little bit better. If Jay had that lower back area filled, I think he would easily take this pose. However, as it is, I'm going to go with Phil for the win. The rear lat spread is interesting, as Jay's width is even more evident now, while Phil's biggest advantage, the arms, are out of the picture. Although Phil clearly has the superior lower back development and arguably more detail, Jay showcases a similar level of thickness in the traps, way more width in the lats, and doesn't look all too bad in the lower back. I'd still give Phil the slightest advantage in the lower body, however Jay's width and thickness might just be too much for Phil. Moreover, take a look at the outer quad sweep on Jay's left leg. He poses it so well to where he completely out-angles Phil in that area. Overall, I think I'd still give this one to Jay, as his back is so wide and dense. However, an argument for Phil winning due to the superior separation and detail still stands. Here's the side tricep, and in this pose, I'd say that both look phenomenal. Neither have any flaws, so this one really comes down to personal preference. Both have great triceps, however, Phil's is strided while Jay's is not. Phil has a bubbly 3D look to his chest and tricep, which really makes him stand out here, while Jay has a picture-perfect midsection, probably one of the best in this pose. The side legs are also pretty close as they both have comparable levels of mass and conditioning. I know a lot of people will probably go with Phil for a superior strided tricep and bubbly chest, however, I've always been a huge fan of Jay's side tricep execution. People tend to forget that posing can make or break a pose, and here I think Jay absolutely obliterates Phil in terms of posing. While we all know that Phil has a massive arm, Jay makes his arm look wider than Phil's by really pushing it into his side and tilts his torso to showcase his superior width. If you couldn't already tell, I'm going to give this one to Jay, however, I can understand why Phil could win this one as well. The Aban Thigh is definitely a close pose because young Phil had a decent midsection, whereas old Jay had an ever-widening one. Both have amazing quads though, with Phil's looking much fuller, but Jay showcasing a tremendous amount of detail and striations. Those striations alone are enough for me to give Jay the lower body advantage, however Phil's calves do make his legs look more complete. Neither have a picturesque midsection, however I've always been a huge fan of Jay's Aban Thigh. This pose is definitely a love it or hate it one for Jay, however I think he looks better than Phil here. Although Phil does have a smaller midsection and arguably a better V-taper, Jay showcases a more pleasing set of abdominals and has similar lat flare. Like I said, this pose is definitely close, however Jay's strided quads and superior abs are enough to win in my opinion. Here's the last pose, the most muscular, and in this one you can see the flaws and strengths that each have perfectly. Phil has so much bubbly thickness in his delts, chest, and arms, but his narrow structure is very visible. On the other hand, Jay has a wide structure and looks grainy in the delts and arms, but lacks the same separation and density in the chest as Phil. Both have amazing quads, however, they are not necessarily integral to the pose. I will say that I do prefer Jay's presentation in the shot, and I do like his aesthetics more, however, it is undeniable that Phil is superior in the density, and his roundness and fullness is definitely better. So I think I'd have to give this one to Phil objectively, as he looks insane in the upper body, while Jay almost looks a little bit flat in comparison. Alright guys, that about does it for this video. In summary, I had this one ending in a tie, however, if you guys went with Phil in the side tricep, this comparison would go to him. That being said, I think it is important to mention that these are purely photos and not a true live video comparison. I think that Jay's muscle maturity combined with his sheer size advantage was probably enough to win. Phil had definitely made substantial improvements to warrant a top 2 finish. However, I think Jay's size, maturity, and not too worn out physique were enough to win. I definitely suggest looking at video footage to form your own opinions, but anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching.